Latino immigrants are 1.5 times more likely to have high blood pressure than when they first arrived, and to be obese. Rates of heart disease and diabetes also increase. More than 20% of Latino households are poor. The longer they're here, the more immigrant families struggle with discrimination, low-paying jobs, bad schools, and bad housing.
And if that environment is giving you cues that you're not valuable, that you have very little prospect for a good future, that starts to build up. You internalize that devaluation.
1 in 4 Latino children drop out of high school. Shockingly, 1 in 7 teenage Latino girls attempt suicide.
Immigrant Latinos, as they acculturate, as the stress levels accumulate, their children start to lose that sense of why it is that they were here. They lose that connection to their parents' hopefulness. They become more American, they acquire American habits, American diets, American sensibilities. They're gaining traction in the American way of life, but they're losing that hopefulness that their immigrant parents brought with them that might actually be health protective.
Today, the Bernals are still healthy, but they're facing the same kinds of pressures and stresses many of us live with day in and day out. Bernardita Bernal packs mushrooms.
Ponemos tapas, hacemos labels, los ponemos, pesamos bolsas. Van salen de 12 a 15 bolsas por minuto. Cada día trabajo 9 o 10 horas diarias. Si hay mucho, trabajamos los 6 días.
Bernardita earns $6.50 an hour. Like many American families, the Bernals need as many incomes as they can generate.
Mi hermano y yo trabajamos en un restaurante llamado Longwood Gardens en el dishwasher. Antes de yo empezar a trabajar ahí, trabajaba ahí en las tardes de 4 a no tenía hora para salir. So, había veces que salía ya bien tarde de trabajar y pues ya llegaba yo bien cansado aquí a mi casa y nada más me dormía. Entonces yo ya no hacía tareas y pues a través de eso iba bajando yo mis calificaciones y por eso preferí salirme de ahí de trabajar y trabajar nada más los fines de semana. ¿No me han hablado por teléfono? ¿Quién habló? ¿Quién sería de las dos? No, no es cierto.
Like half of American households, the Bernals live on about $46,000 a year. And they're trying to make ends meet in one of the most upscale counties in Pennsylvania. Even renting a small house by the train tracks is expensive. 3/4 of their income goes to basic expenses, like rent, food, utilities, and transportation, for a family of 6.
¿Qué hay en especial? El pavo. ¿Qué hay en especial el pavo?
3 out of 4 Americans who started out at the bottom of the income ladder in the late 1980s were still there a decade later.
John, Colonel Hunter, please come and serve us, John.
¿Ya qué se decía, che?
There's this mythology of the American dream that, anybody can move up that ladder with the right amount of gumption. Then there are certainly anecdotal stories of that, and people have good luck and good fortune. But for the most part, the overwhelming majority of people don't move up that ladder.
These economic insecurities erode the social and family ties that support our health.
por una parte no los podemos tener todo el tiempo como mi mamá, llegando de la escuela y estaba con nosotros y todo. Y aquí pues llegamos y mamá, yo estoy aquí solito, no que llega mi hermana, mi papá, y luego va a recoger a mi mamá.
One of the things that we know that immigrant parents do is that they work, and they work a lot. And so as a consequence, their children have less time with them, and have less exposure to them, to those cultural aspects of family, of community, that parents inculcate in their children.
Olga and Maritza were 11 and 8 when they came to the U.S. When social and family ties begin to fray, it's the mental health of the youngest arrivals that's the most vulnerable. The risk of psychiatric disorders for Latino immigrant children depends on their age when they arrive here.
The longer you stay in your country of origin, for especially the times where you have a higher risk of developing illnesses like psychiatric disorders like anxiety or like depression, the longer you stay in your country of origin, the lower the risk you're going to have of developing those disorders. What is it in this country that suddenly increases your risk for psychiatric illness? What are we doing here?
William Vega has studied the psychological health of Mexican immigrants in California.
If nothing else, the paradox is putting the spotlight on the fact that the United States has very high levels of depression. And we found when we looked at the population that came as immigrants and had about 13 years or less in the country, they had very, very low levels of major depression, only about 8%. The general population of the United States, that would be 18 to 20% in a lifetime. But those levels increased when we looked at people who had been in the country over 13 years. See, these protective factors begin to wear down, and then subsequently over multiple generations, we can anticipate that they'll look increasingly just like the American people as a population, because they live here, they become Americans.
For immigrant mushroom workers, becoming an American is a journey filled with opportunity, challenges, and risks. A number of workers are beginning to feel the effects of newly diagnosed chronic diseases.
Familia, hay personas que tienen la diabetes. Yo lo tengo. ¿Usted lo tiene? ¿Y cuándo le diagnosticaron?
Hace como 9 meses.
9 meses, muy recién, entonces.
Like almost half of America's workforce, mushroom workers get no paid sick days. Recently, 3 mushroom farms allowed La Comunidad Hispana, a social service agency in Kennett Square, to open clinics on site.
Workers don't like to take time off from work. It's money not being earned, and they really do need to earn money. So that they would not necessarily go to see anybody until symptoms are pretty bad.
¿Puedes levantar la camisa?
Obesity probably is the leading issue here, and along with that comes all the other problems of diabetes and hypertension, hypercholesterolemia. And of course with all of that you have strokes coming down the pike, congestive heart failure. So we do screening of all of those. For whatever reason the patient comes in, that's the protocol.
Correcto. ¿Y otra vez?
By the year 2050, 1 in 4 Americans will be Latino.
If we acknowledge that this is the population that's growing, then, you know, we have to plan for 20 years from now, 30 years from now. If well-being isn't prioritized now, then what's the landscape of our country going to look like 20, 30 years from now?
Si yo tuviera crédito, pues sí me gustaría comprar una casa. Pero no tenemos nada ahorrado. Con un poco de dinero que tenga uno. Entonces ya lo pueden dar un obsequio más de crédito para una casita y ya lo vamos pagando poco a poco.
The Bernals are hopeful about their future. But can they maintain their hope and their health as they become more American and as America becomes more a part of them?
When we talk about acculturation, the process of becoming more Americanized, it's not a process of changing cultures A to Z. It's a process of selectively taking on elements of American culture. And I think if we can bring that selection process into clear focus of which processes are selected and which are not selected and which are retained from the old culture, you have a better mix.
And this may have lessons for all of us.
As a society, we can build hope. And we do that by giving people access to those things that give them potential for success. That's good education, that's access to good jobs, decent housing, and then a sense of belonging to a community, belonging to something larger than yourself, larger than your family. The potential right now is to try to take what we can see, obviously, in new immigrant communities, the health protective benefits of being a new immigrant, and understand